But what we're going to do today is I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to talk about how I became an attorney and then what happened. Some of you may be somewhat familiar with my story, but now you get to hear the real thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to 1988. That's me. And by the way, you can track my hair loss right through the entire slide presentation here. Yes, believe it or not, it was all up there. That's not a wig. I was a high school dropout. I went to Cox High School up in Virginia Beach, grew up in Virginia Beach. I was a surfer, still am. Pretty much just didn't go to class. It wasn't that I wasn't smart. I just really didn't apply myself, and eventually got to the point to where, it just wasn't worth staying. I'd probably have to go another 3 years of high school when I was 18. I think the highest grade I got past was the 9th grade, if I'm not mistaken. 1989, I took the GED test. That was my lone bright spot at the time. I went and took the test and passed it my first time. I then enrolled right on time with all my other friends at TCC, Tidewater Community College. But once again, I never went to class. I did go there to get the chicken sandwiches. They were pretty good at the cafeteria, but that's pretty much about it. I failed everything, including orientation. I don't know how you fail orientation, but I did. And that followed me around for a little while, actually. I had no job, no car. I was living in my parents' garage. When I say I was living in my parents' garage, my dad put a rope across the garage to separate me from the tractor. I threw some blankets on the floor. He hung some blankets over the rope and put a bed out there. He cut a hole in the ductwork, so I had heat and air, and that was about it. So I tried moving down here. I actually moved down here to the Outer Banks, probably about 1989, 1990, right in that range. And it was great. I worked at Little Caesars up there at the Kill Devil Hills. Had to dress up as Little Caesar and walk around the parking lot occasionally. It's kind of funny. Pizza. Yeah, that's what I had to say. I pretty much failed at that too, and this is an actual picture of me leaving the Outer Banks. That's the only thing I owned was that dog Reef. I moved back to the good life in my parents' garage. I don't even think I owned a shirt at the time. I left my surfboard as rent for the guy that I was living with because I didn't have any money or anything left. So. Then, okay, well, I was down about as far as I could get, so now the only thing to do is go up. I have a friend up in Virginia Beach who's a loan officer, has been one of my best friends since paper routes in high school, and he paid for me to take a class at TCC, and it was an accounting class, and I got a C-, which was a big deal for me. I actually got some college credit. I got a regular job doing landscaping. And I bought a car, and believe it or not. I actually had a car. It was a 1980 Ford Fiesta. Here it is. There's my sweet ride right there. That's exactly it. If I'd hit a speed bump, it would bottom out on the back wheels if anybody was sitting in the back seat. Okay, we all know about setting goals and that sort of thing. Well, I wasn't afraid to dream kind of big. I started telling people that I was going to be a lawyer. I said, you know what, I think I want to be a lawyer. And people looked at me like I was nuts. I had this girlfriend at the time. And I told her. She really didn't say much to me. She kind of was just like, oh, okay. The next day she came up to me and she said, I talked to my mom last night. And she said that, we talked a little bit, and we think paralegal may be a better goal for you, okay? So we ended up breaking up after that. But, trust me, if I went back to the first slide, I looked pretty much just like I did then. I wouldn't have believed myself either. I continued to improve, though. I did get married to my first wife, Karen, in 1993. I started my own landscaping company. My first son, Tyler, was born, and I continued at Tidewater Community College. I did a little better each time, but never did great while I was there. That's me and my first son. I look like a 16-year-old kid. He's 22 now, and he's pretty much just like I was on the first slide. So he lives, by the way, in my garage on the second floor. It's a little nicer than what we had, before. But anyway, 1995. Have you all heard the From Here Go Anywhere? It's real big with community colleges now. Well, it really just started back then. When I did this. And it basically said that if I had a 2.0 GPA, I could transfer to Old Dominion. And I was like, okay, well, I checked my GPA because I had no idea. I probably didn't even know what a GPA was, quite frankly. And I had a 2.035. So I was able to transfer to ODU. And one thing that transferring, it's really nice, is that it gives you a fresh start on your GPA. Now, when I applied for law school, they'd average the two together, but I got to start fresh, and I really seized that opportunity at that time. I took everything real seriously, and I was on Dean's List every semester that I was there. Continued telling people I was going to be a lawyer. It was still pretty far-fetched. I applied to several law schools. I think I applied to like 12 different law schools, just thinking, okay, somebody might take me. And really, I wanted to go to Widener up in Wilmington, Delaware. My uncle is an attorney up in outside Philadelphia, and he went to Delaware Law, which is Widener. So I actually got accepted there, and I was shocked. Okay, I'm actually going to go to law school, and quite a few people were shocked at the time. Graduated with honors from Old Dominion in '97 May. Then I got this letter in the mail. Actually, it wasn't a letter, it was a phone call now I think about it. I got a call from a school down in Miami called St. Thomas School of Law. And they said, hey, we'll give you 10 grand a year if you come down here to Miami and go to our law school. So I'm like, you got the right person? Are you sure you're calling the right person? Yes, they were. So I checked, made sure the school was accredited. I mean, both of them were Tier 4 law schools. It really didn't matter. And then it really came down to, okay, well, where do I want to spend the next 3 years? Nobody's from Delaware here, are they? I hope not. Okay. Because I found the worst picture of Delaware I could possibly find right there. But I had a choice, Delaware in that slum right there or Miami, and I chose Miami and the 10 grand a year. So I ended up going down there. During law school, I worked really, really hard my first semester especially. And I did pretty well. I stayed in the top 15% of the class. I was married and had a kid. Most of my friends were single in law school. I kind of coasted after the first year. Once my GPA was established, I really didn't get into all the moot courts and law review and that sort of thing. And I really kind of, I'd have to say that I enjoyed my 3 years in Miami. Graduated in May of 2000. I had a choice then. I could stay down in Miami and, okay, what are my options in Miami? Well, who do I know? I know other people that are going to be lawyers, or move back to Virginia Beach, where if people could see past who I used to be, had a big, what should I say, pool of clients, potential clients, because I knew a lot of people. So I did move back to Virginia, and I decided to sit for the bar in Virginia. Sat for the bar in July of 2000. Okay, this is kind of a funny story. Does anybody know what that machine is right there? It's called an aerator. It actually puts plugs in the ground, okay? And if anybody's ever run an aerator, it will drag your butt all over the place, okay? Now, there's a building in Virginia Beach off of Dam Neck Road somewhere, I believe it is. It's called the Geico building, and it's Geico's corporate headquarters. Huge campus, okay? Hundreds of acres of grounds. Well, I took a job because when you take the bar, you really don't know the results, obviously. I came out of it saying, hey, I guess I could have passed that test. So, I take the test, and, I'm like, what? I don't know that I want to get a job, with a law firm, because what if I fail? I hate the thought of, okay, oh, by the way, I didn't pass after you hired me and been, grooming me for. So I was like, I'm going to get this job over here at ChemLawn, and then they dropped me off at the Geico building with that machine in August, and I thought I was going to die. I never have been so tired in my life. So what it motivated me to do was send a resume to every lawyer in the phone book that night, every single one in the phone book, and that's back when the phone book was really the phone book, okay? I received one call. It was from a guy in the Berg Legal Clinic, which was basically, he had small offices, one attorney per office, and paralegal staff, and they did a lot of simple matters. It was, a legal clinic type thing. And he called me over and said, can you come over to my house right now? And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll be right there. So I throw on my suit and I get over there. I knock on his door, and he actually lived out in Great Neck where I grew up. So I was like, okay, I feel pretty comfortable. He answered the door in pajamas, okay? All the interview prep that I had did not really prepare me for seeing Ron Berg in his pajamas, okay? I had to share a hotel with him once after that on a convention, and I had to see it again. Anyway, he offered me a whopping 29 grand a year plus commission, and he had his briefcase, and he'd open his briefcase about maybe this far and pull paper out like there's something secret going on inside the briefcase, trying to explain this commission structure and how I was going to get rich. I think I made like $35,000 my first year, but and he gave me $7 an hour to the bar results. That's how much ChemLawn was, or True Green, or whatever it was paying me, so I took it and ran. I did pass the bar exam my first time. They gave me an office and a staff, and it was kind of funny because of the fact that, when you come out of law school, you really don't know a whole lot. In fact, you don't know anything really about the practice of law. And I had a staff of seasoned paralegals in my office that not only knew more than me, they knew more than me. And oh my gosh, it was just brutal. There were other attorneys in the firm I can call for different stuff, but we primarily did bankruptcy. I did Social Security, disability, and then just uncontested divorce and that sort of thing, wills, that kind of thing. But they did it in volume. And actually, this is my first office. It's now a cash advance store out in the Ward's Corner section. And I bet none of you lawyers here can say, what I have to say here, that you had an office that was attached to a strip club. Okay, that's, yes, that's my first office. And if I didn't make my commission, of course, I could always try for amateur Wednesday night to win that $200 prize, but I never did. So anyway, okay, time for a change. I must have a target on my back, because some of you people may recognize some names you see here, but in 2002, I was hired by what seemed like a pretty prestigious firm up in Virginia Beach. It was called Titus Law Group, and there was a gentleman named Troy Titus. Some of you may be familiar with Troy and his story. Anyway, I got hired by them, and that's where I learned how to do real estate and estate planning, and I really had a lot of real estate connections because my mother was the in charge director of education for the Board of Realtors up in Hampton Roads, and my family had been involved in real estate for some time. Troy, there's this picture right there. Extremely charismatic guy. Very, 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 probably one of the smartest people I think I've ever met. Smart, but stupid, but smart. Whatever that made sense or not. Anyway, when I had to get an interview with him, it took me like 2-3 weeks to get an interview because the guy was just so booked. His clients just worshipped him. And he appeared to be real successful. And, real strong Christian guy he professed to be, and it seemed like he was backing it up. I mean, it just really seemed like, gosh, if I could model myself after a lawyer, this would be the guy. And then comes mentors, okay? Troy was my mentor. And if I wasn't certain about something, and I got eaten alive when I went from Berg Legal Clinic to working with sophisticated real estate investors that, have millions of dollars of property from doing bankruptcies for my strip club friends next door, or from whoever else was doing that. So, he always had the answer, and I always just accepted his answer as the answer. But through there, I did become more comfortable working with the sophisticated clients. Just a little lesson here, be careful of your mentors, okay? Check them out, okay? Most of you are beyond the mentor point, most likely, but during my first years at the firm, most people would never have expected what ended up happening to Troy. And I'll get to that in a second if you're not familiar with the situation, but it's, be careful of just listening to somebody else's word for things. Back it up with doing your own diligence. Started doing really well at that firm by mid-2003. I built a lot of clientele of my own. I was making really good salary commissions. I began to see Rachel over there. Now, before all the ladies here give me the stink eye, I did get divorced sometime in there. I did not have a slide for the divorce. I could put one in there sometime if somebody wants to really see it, but we do have the papers. But I began to see Rachel. Rachel actually worked at that firm over there. There we are in our matching black, and the turtleneck sweater looks real nice there. Oh, yeah. We got engaged in February 2004. Okay, now by the end of 2004, I started noticing some changes with Troy Titus at the firm. He started taking a lot of out-of-town clients. He started working with, for lack of a better word, he worked with some music artists, some rappers, and stuff like that. Pharrell Williams was a client at the office. He would come in and do certain things in the office. There's a guy named Teddy Riley who was in a group called Blackstreet. I guess he was evicted from his house, and he had all his stuff in our office because he was living on his tour bus. So there was a Grammy in our office, and there was an MTV award in our office, and it was kind of really strange. And that's not what our firm was about. It really didn't fit into our dynamic. I didn't know what was going on exactly. The firm was having some financial troubles. They merged with another firm at the time. Something was definitely different. Troy and his wife had split up. And I guess he went with the babysitter. It was the babysitter that he went with. And she was like 19, was it 19? Yeah, 19 years old. So, and then March of 2005, I get a phone call. I had done a closing for a good client of mine a couple days before. And he had done a sale, and I guess we probably did both sides because we cut him the check after the closing, and the check bounced. Okay, a escrow account from a closing bounced. Now, think of how deficient an account would have to have been in 2005 for a $50,000 or $60,000 check to bounce. I mean, and we did a good volume. I mean, we did, buyers and refis probably about, 60, 70 closings a month roughly, not counting seller sides. I mean, for the size of our real estate department, we did a fair amount, which I would say would equate to probably about, what, 3 million average daily balance in a trust account, roughly. I asked Troy about it right away because my client called and he's like, hey, Steve, my check bounced. I'm like, okay, that shouldn't happen. Let me call Troy. And I called Troy. He told me it was a bank error. Now, banks do make errors. When I started my firm, I got a call, said my trust account was overdrawn. I'm like, no, it's not. And they said, yes, it's overdrawn. You need to have so many $1,000s in here. I said, no, it's not. Let's figure out what's going on. And it turns out that they cut like 4 zeros off of a deposit. Okay, so banks do make mistakes. Over the next week or so, I got more calls, and I started saying, okay, this is no bank error. Something is not right. So what I did was I contacted a friend of mine who worked for the firm, who's an attorney also, who's very close to Troy. And I asked her, I said, do you know what's going on here? Do you have any idea? And she said, I think Troy may have been abusing the trust account. I don't think she knew for sure, but I think she kind of had come to that conclusion herself. Troy had hired her right out of law school. They were very tight. She kind of saw Troy as a father figure and mentor. Okay, so I had a decision to make at this particular time. Okay, I could, go along with what I was being told, and just let it play out, or I could take the action that I was supposed to take. And you're going to find that during your careers, you will have moments that you have to make a decision, a critical decision that could actually affect your career, sometimes in a limited amount of time to reflect on that decision. So I urge you to to really take a moment and make sure you do the right thing. I hired an ethics attorney. I reported the matter to the bar. I resigned from the firm, and then under the North Carolina rules of professional conduct, a lawyer who knows that another lawyer has committed a violation of the rules of professional conduct that raises a substantial question as to that lawyer's honesty, trustworthiness. You guys are familiar with the rule. We have to put the rules in here for the CLE purposes, but the fact that I knew something was up, it seemed like something was up, was enough for me that I felt like that I had the obligation. Virginia has a very similar rule. Okay, so what happened with Troy? Well, in 2009, he was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. Well, for his trust account? That doesn't make sense, does it? What he was doing, if he had just left it at his trust account, he'd probably be okay. But I think what he was trying to do was, when he started taking his out-of-town clients, he was basically promising people that they'd be in first position on this particular hotel in South Carolina or whatever this investment deal. He was soliciting people to invest on investments that either didn't exist, or they were in 10th position on this hotel in South Carolina, or what have you. And then he was paying other people back with that money. And what does that all of a sudden turn into? Turns into a little Madoff, like a Ponzi scheme. And that's what they went after him on. Now, if Troy had taken a plea, he probably would have ended up with 10 years. But he actually went to trial and maintained his innocence, and 30 years. He's not going to get out till he's 72 years old, something like that. They did a American Greed special on him. If you care to watch that, I'm sure you can find the old episodes of that. Now, Christina Cardwell, she was sentenced to 5.5 years in federal prison, my good friend Chris. Why is that? Well, Troy got Chris on a couple of deals to act as a straw buyer, to get credit in her name for a couple of houses, okay, for his purposes. And this is back in 2004, 2005 when she did it. Stated income, no doc loans, for those of you who don't know what that is, okay. It was basically a mortgage that you didn't have to back it up with any paperwork, okay. Watch The Big Short. Oh my gosh, what an eye-opener that was. Anyway, she got sentenced to 5.5 years in prison. And the funny thing about it is, half of America was doing exactly what she did. It doesn't matter, okay? It's still a crime. Everybody that lied on their applications on a stated no-doc loan committed a crime. But she did it in connection with Troy, which kind of brought her under the microscope. And they really went after her very hard. She did testify against Troy at trial, and I got that cut in half. She had a 2-year-old daughter. She had to leave to go to prison. She's a good girl, was a very good attorney. She actually works in our office as a paralegal now up in Virginia Beach. The snowball effect, that's what I think happened with Troy. He's probably started using his trust account funds, okay? Started using a little bit here and there for various things. And what happens? Oh, I'll never do that again. I'll just do it this once. Well, it gets worse and worse and worse. And then all of a sudden you have that overdraft at the end, and I mean, you're done. Yeah, there's a reason why you can't use that money. It is not your money. So what did I do at that point? I went and started my own firm. Most of my clients went out with me. In Virginia, okay, attorneys can own title agencies. Okay, so if you see Virtue Title and Escrow underneath there, that is, well, it was my title agency. Now it's Rachel's title agency. It still exists. And that's my first office when I opened my firm. Most of the clients came with me. Within 6 months, I was doing 50 to 60 closings a month. We were doing real well. Rachel graduated from law school 2005. We got married in 2005. You know, the firm was busy. Things were good. We were making a lot of money, having a lot of, you know, good opportunities to do different things. Hawaii, cruises. I don't know what that is. The hair came back there for a little bit. And if you notice at that picture in front of the office, there was a little bit of receding up there on either side. Kentucky Derby, we moved to Hertford, North Carolina. That was our house. We moved to World Series. You know, me and Dick Cheney would get together from time to time and, you know, go over. Actually, that was like about 2 weeks after the quail hunt, by the way. And I was in a line with like 300 people, and I was near the end of the line. So he was actually a very funny speaker, but when I walked up there, I looked like I'm scared to death, and you know, he had his picture taken 300 times, so I'm sure he, you know, looked real thrilled to be with me. I was president of the Tidewater Real Estate Investors Group, which is the largest real estate investor club in the Hampton Roads area. We had, you know, 200-300 investors as members, and I was president of that for probably about 5 years, roughly. You know, one of the areas of my practice that I really focused on was working with investors, okay? And I think that is an area that you as attorneys need to be very careful, because investors go to these seminars around the country and they learn these creative ways of doing transactions. I had a recent speaker up there at the Tidewater Real Estate Investors Group. He was an attorney. His name's Bill Bronchek. Okay, he's out of Colorado, and he was speaking to Trig, that's the group, about 2 months ago, telling them how they could wholesale, which means basically buy a property but not take title and pass it off to somebody else. It's kind of like a contract assignment, but how you could wholesale a short sale. So he was saying you could contract to do a short sale in the name of an LLC and then just sell the LLC to somebody to buy it and close. To me, that is a way to, you know, it seems like a deceptive tactic that the bank would not know what's going on, and potentially fraud. But that's just something that they're teaching out there. So you really have to be careful about what some of these investors are doing. And it doesn't mean that they're necessarily bad people. They're just learning these things, and they're paying to learn these things, and it gets kind of scary. One of the best purchases of my life, a office condo in 2007. Yes, it's worth about $225, $250 now. I think I paid $489 for it. And that's where our Virginia Beach office is. Yeah, we're right there, though. We're about even right now, so we're pretty excited about that. Fortunately, it was on a short amortization, so it'll be paid off in about 8 years. But the best description of the real estate market during the boom came from one of my buddies, and he called it the Wild West. And how many of you guys worked during that time? I mean, in the market. You know, a few of you, probably some didn't raise their hand, but anyway. It was crazy. It was just ridiculous. And I just talked about stated income, no doc loans, but it was just a ridiculous time. And then what happened? Well, we all know what happens. The well went dry. Everything, kind of slowed down. We took a bit of a hit. I had to cut back on some staff. We went from 50 to 60 closings down to like 40 closings at first. Okay. I had to lay off my receptionist. I replaced her with a doorbell up there, so when it said please ring when you come in, and then somebody would come from upstairs. I still called the the doorbell Edna, just for purposes to make it feel like she was still with us. But we were still successful. We just had to make some adjustments. We were still doing good, probably because we were working still with investors, and investors were still buying. But then in June of 2008. I heard Edna ring up front, so I walked up. My office was downstairs, so I was the closest to the front. And there was a gentleman from the FBI there, and he had a subpoena for documents for a grand jury regarding a client named Wayne Lizama. Okay, well, I didn't really think anything of it. They just wanted copies of his files, so it's like, okay, that's fine. In June of 2006, I hired a new employee. Real estate processors are very difficult positions to fill. Okay, I'm sure you guys know that. It's not an easy job, and it's hard to find a real quality processor that knows their stuff. So what I used to do would be steal them from other firms, and I'd try and hire them from somebody else, somebody that I'd ask my staff. I'm like, hey, who's good? Well, they said this girl named Lori from this attorney David Timberlake's office was real good, and I knew her husband, I guess it was. I don't know if they were married at the time. And Lori was going to come to work for us. But Lori had some sort of a health issue that she couldn't change her health insurance at the time, and she said, there's another girl here, though, Peter Ann, that's real good. And I said, okay, send her in, we'll take an interview, and I hired her. And then I always said, so do you have any clients that are going to come with you? And one client, and that happened to be Mr. Wayne Lazama. So anyway, I copied the files, I hand them over, I take them out to Norfolk where the branch office of the FBI is. I really didn't think of that much of it. I really didn't even look at the files when I was copying because they're files that thick, and I just, copied them, got them all copied and delivered them. I didn't think it could have anything to do with us. So about a year later, came into the office, picture your ordinary day. You come in, you might have a cup of coffee, check your emails, sitting around, trying to think of what I'm going to start to work on. I hear Edna ring again. I walk up there, and then there's 2 FBI agents there this time. And what they want to do is they want to question me about those files. Okay, now those files closed in 2006, so we're talking about 2009. And if you look at the volume I was talking about, you can see how many closings had taken place in between that time. So having a good recollection of what exactly happened on those closings, I did not have. And he was asking very specific questions to me about it. I just didn't really remember the closings. I suggested, hey, I think it was Agent Colin Wood was one of the agents. I'm like, Agent Wood, why don't we do this? Let me look at these files, and I could probably speak intelligently to you about them if you give me a couple of days to look at it. He asked to talk to my staff. I said, that's fine. I said, we're open book. I'll let you, look at whatever. He told me I wasn't under investigations. But when I was looking at the documents and looking at the files, I saw problems, okay? So, you know what? I started getting a little bit nervous at that point. I was very honest with him. Obstruction of justice, by the way, is something that the government uses, and it has a lot of teeth. And what did Martha Stewart go to prison for? I believe it was obstruction of justice that she actually went to prison for. I think Barry Bonds got convicted of obstruction of justice, but not the underlying crime that they were pursuing him for. But that is something. So if they come to you, and you talk to them, you better be honest with them. Otherwise, they're going to turn around and hit you up with that. So they did talk to the employees. I already talked about that. I reviewed the files. I did see the closings. Called them back, went over them with them. But then there was a gap where nothing happened. And of course, and I'm a worrier. I mean, I was really kind of like, this isn't right. There's really a problem here. So, I'm kind of recalling some bits and pieces. It didn't matter that he told me I wasn't under investigation. I remember him saying, quite frankly, I don't even know, if it's illegal, what we're talking about. He just was gathering information for the U.S. attorney. It's kind of like trying to put together a puzzle. But then came January 7th, 2010, which was, I remember the day pretty well. He showed up. They always showed up unannounced for some reason. But I was always available. So I don't know whether they checked my schedule or what, but he came in and he said he wanted to go over everything one more time, and then he would let me know where things stood. And immediately at that point, I kind of was like, well, I guess I kind of have an idea where things stand now. So I went over everything with him, and then he handed me this letter from the U.S. attorney that said that they felt like they had enough information to go after me for a 4-count indictment for wire fraud. Why wire fraud? Anybody see The Firm, the Tom Cruise movie? What'd they get the firm on in the end? Mail fraud, okay? Because they were sending out bills in the mail that were, they were overbilling, okay? And to, use the mail by, for fraudulent means is a crime. Well, wire fraud is the same thing, but with emails or faxes or anything like that. So it's kind of like a catch-all that they use, and it has teeth, has quite a bit of teeth actually. I could show you the bite mark right about here if you want to see it. But anyway, I had till January 22nd to contact an attorney to go to meet with the U.S. attorney to discuss a pre-indictment resolution. Okay, I really didn't know what that meant exactly. I really couldn't believe, what was going on was actually happening. And I was actually an attorney that worked with investors and spoke to investors about trying to, be very ethical in your investing. So it was kind of something like, how did this happen to me? I really just wasn't ready for it. So if you're ever an attorney and you're going to engage a criminal defense attorney, it's not a good day, let me just tell you that. Okay, and I went into his office, and it's very important that if you ever have a federal problem, you have a federal criminal defense attorney or a federal attorney of some sort that has experience, because it's a completely different world. I remember sitting in his lobby, and I just felt like the biggest loser in the world. And if that's not bad enough, he had Jerry Springer on the TV. Okay, so I'm sitting there feeling like the biggest loser, watching the fans go around and these people beating each other up, and I'm just like, oh, how did it come to this? What has happened here? So I told him the story. He scheduled a meeting with the U.S. attorney and said, hey, let's meet again as soon as I get done with that. So the next time I come back, okay, his receptionist hands me 2 documents. And the first thing that caught my eye was the United States of America versus Stephen Martin Gunther. Okay, no, not the Virgin Islands versus Stephen Gunther, not the United States of America versus Stephen Martin Gunther. It's not a pretty sight. I looked at him. It was a criminal information and a plea agreement. A criminal information is an agreement to an indictment without going before a grand jury. So it's basically, they didn't have to go to a grand jury if I signed off on it or anything like that. Yeah. Let's see, there's just a copy of the criminal information. You can see the style up there. So, yeah, I love looking at it. My attorney's recommendation, he basically said that, Steve, I see what happens here. I really don't think they should be pursuing you in particular, but right now is a time that they are trying to get anybody they can that had anything in connection, and they are calling you a facilitator. They're saying that even though you really didn't profit from this, other than your normal fees, it could have stopped. And I agree. It could have stopped in my office. I could have stopped it. I speak occasionally with a former U.S. attorney who's a law professor up in Minnesota. And he usually starts off by saying, 10 years ago, they would have had no interest in Stephen Gunther. But in this time, where they're really cracking down on what made the economy go bad. And it doesn't matter that 10 years ago they didn't have interest in pursuing me. 10 years ago it was still a crime. So that's important that you understand that. The plea offered a plea to 1 count of wire fraud. He told me, and I appreciate this, he went through the guidelines. He said 26 to 32 months, you will go to prison. Okay, so I had a decision to make, and I had some things to consider. The U.S. attorneys have approximately a 92% conviction rate if you go to trial. Okay, so that leaves me what, 8% to win. And the bottom line is that I was guilty. Okay, of the technical crime, I was guilty. It doesn't matter that I didn't set out to do it. It doesn't matter that I didn't profit from it. The crime I was guilty of. So I didn't want them to go after my staff. Okay, I didn't want to, I really wanted to protect my staff. They were, other than the one girl, which I really didn't, I really don't know what her involvement was 100%. And how do you defend yourself if you really don't have a really good recollection of what happened? So there's a copy of the plea agreement initialed off on there. And then the North Carolina Rules of Professional Conduct. It's a professional misconduct for a lawyer to commit a criminal act that adversely reflects on honesty, trustworthiness, or fitness of the lawyer in other respects, to engage in conduct, dishonesty, fraud, deceit, or misrepresentation. It's important, though, to take from this that when you find yourself in a situation, a bad situation, it doesn't have to be like this, but if you face problems head on, you will come out better for it, and I promise you that. I had to contact the bar. Now, the reason why I talk about how hard it was for me to become a lawyer is because it kind of lends to my state of mind when I'm sending this letter to the bar, surrendering my license because I was being convicted, of a crime. I signed off on an affidavit consenting to the revocation of my license. I did, went to them, made it all easy. The funny thing is that they billed me for it. Now, the one thing my attorney was not correct about was when it was going to hit the paper. I was due like March 25th to go to court to get the court to accept my plea agreement. And at that point, he said that's probably when it would hit the paper. Well, Tim McGlone of the Virginia Pilot is very zealous apparently, or has some tipsters down there, and when the criminal information was filed, he picked it up. So it hit the paper when I wasn't expecting it. And, you know, of course, I lived in Hertford, North Carolina at the time, so you know, it didn't just hit the Pilot. It hit the Perquimans Weekly. It hit the Daily Advance. It's like, you know, and basically it talks here about unidentified. If you ever read about it, you see it talk about unidentified third parties called straw purchasers. Well, what it was there was two investors that were partners, and one of them got the loans in his name. They weren't straw buyers. They weren't true straw purchasers. They were just partners in the deal. I don't know what that was about, but you know, I don't think it really made a difference, quite honestly, as to, you know, the plea. Now, that was a really bad day when I got to the office and somebody told me it hit the paper. The phone started ringing, of course. You know, Kay Windsor, who was Fidelity's counsel up there in Virginia, called me up. She said, Steve, I got to suspend your agency till we figure out what the heck's going on here. I said, okay, I understand. My bank, who I had business equity lines with and different things going on, called me up. I said, I'll be in there tomorrow. Let's, we'll go over everything. So I kind of faced everything head on, but it was really, all things that I had planned on doing before it hit the paper, I kind of got thrown on me all at once and had to kind of scramble. I had to tell my 16-year-old son that I was probably going to prison. And no, I didn't stand there and take a Polaroid of him I just had that picture with his head down, so it just seemed to fit. The plea agreement, I had to appear in front of the court, okay, which was pretty humiliating, and accept that I was guilty of a crime, or offer the plea to the court, which they accepted. The judge got about 75 letters of support for me. I had a full courtroom on the day of sentencing, the guidelines were 26 to 32 months, not 26 to 36 months. Now, something happened in court on the day of sentencing. This happened in June, and let me just stop there. Right about, for the first 2 months after January, I felt really sorry for myself. Maybe about the first month and a half, and I didn't want to go anywhere, I didn't want to do anything. And then I just said, you know what, I'm going to show them who I am. So I started actually going out and speaking to various investment groups. I think I did about 10 events between then and when I got sentenced in June, and just used myself as an example. Just tried to do everything the right way. When the U.S. Attorney asked for financial statements from me, I gave them organized binders, that thick, 2 of them, stuff that they weren't used to getting, stuff they weren't used to seeing, I complied with. And when the judge asked the U.S. Attorney, how long, what their recommendation was for sentencing, I asked my attorney beforehand, I said, what's the U.S. Attorney going to ask for? He says, they always go mid-guidelines unless they really hate you. Well, I knew they didn't really hate me, so we were expecting mid-guidelines. He did something a little unusual. He actually asked for 24 months, which is less than the low end of the guideline range, which was basically sending a message to the judge that, hey, this guy's not Charles Manson here or anything like that. Judge gave me 20 months in federal prison. He allowed me to self-report, which means they didn't have to take me in shackles. Apparently the U.S. Marshal that was in the room had gotten up after I got sentenced. I didn't know about it. Rachel told me about it, and started walking with handcuffs towards me, and then backed off when they allowed me to self-report. I had to pay the bank's losses back, and I'm still paying it back, $231,000, which are basically the amounts the banks lost when these properties went into foreclosure. These guys got these loans in 2006 at the end. They were investors. They were buying them, rehabbing them, and turning around and reselling them. But the bubble burst, they couldn't resell them, so they resulted in foreclosures. So I'm responsible for the losses on that, which I don't have a problem with whatsoever. I agree 100%. Now, what exactly did I do? We'll go through this real quick, and we're getting close to the end. 4 closings. Okay, the first 2. Okay, closing number 1. I hire that new employee, Peter Ann. She has this new client. She says, Steve, David, the attorney she worked for before, would loan him money if he needed money for closing, and she'd pay him X amount of dollars. I said, well, that seems a little high, the rate. She's like, he needs $6,000. So I was like, okay, well, all right, well, how long till I get paid back? And it was a very short period of time. So I was like, okay, well, I'll loan the $6,000 and just have him pay me $500 back for it. Okay. So we do the closing. I get paid back my $6,000 plus $500. I'd seen it done at Titus's office, where they he had loaned clients money. David Timberlake was I think he was in his 50s. He'd been practicing a lot longer than I had. the second closing, okay, he needed $16,000. I think I got paid $900 to do that loan. But I said, you know what? I don't want to make any more loans, okay? He's going to have to get his money somewhere else after this. I did those 2 loans. I felt like I was wearing too many hats, okay? I was doing the closing. I was lending money. We were insuring title because we owned a title agency. I mean, too much involved. He's got to get his money somewhere else. So then what happens is there's a third closing, okay? And the processor closed it without me even knowing it closed. And what she did was Mr. Lizama, or his partner, I don't remember, I guess it was his partner, on the seller side of the HUD had a consulting fee payable to an LLC that he owned for the amount of the down payment money. Okay, everybody follow that? So basically, without him bringing in money, there was enough money in escrow because he would be getting money back after the closing. They just didn't cut the money back to him after the closing. She structured it with him that way. She sat in on it. We're talking about, like I said, during the boom, I had staff occasionally sit in on closings. If I was in another room doing a closing, that sort of thing, I had no idea this particular closing went on. Now here's where I found my real fault to be, was the fourth closing. It was set up exactly the same way as the third closing, okay? And what we have here is I sit in on the closing. I really didn't even look at the seller side. I didn't represent the seller in that particular transaction. Mr. Lizama had money he had to bring to the table. I said, okay, well, it wasn't uncommon to get a package late, so they didn't have their money. They'd have to go get a certified check. Here's how much you need to get. Just bring it in and get in as soon as possible so we can disperse. We have 48 hours in Virginia from the time of closing to disperse by law. Okay, so, after the first day, I'm asking the processor, hey, did he bring in his money? No, he hasn't brought it in yet. He's getting it. Okay. I start getting a call from the person that represented the seller saying, hey, our seller needs to get their money. I think they might have even had another house closing that they needed that money for. It's like, okay, well, we're just waiting on the buyer's, funds to come in, blah, blah, blah. Kept getting calls, kept asking, no. Finally, at the end, at the last minute, I say, Peter Ann, where is his money? He doesn't have it. Okay. Then she pointed out to me on the seller side of the HUD what she had on there. And I had a choice to make, and I made a very bad choice. I said, close it. We will never close anything like this again. And we're not working with Mr. Lizama again. That's it. Okay. Does that fix it? No. By doing it, I committed a crime. Okay. So, all right, we've been through all that. Okay, so that's basically the 4 closings. Okay, July 9, 2010, I reported to Butner Federal Prison Camp, and by the way, that barbed wire over there, that's a medium security. I was at a camp, but that's where Bernie Madoff is, in that section over there. I had to say goodbye to my family. I was strip searched. I was processed. The whole fun stuff. I was given a used set of prison clothes. I was pretty scared. There's no real orientation. They took me in to a dorm and basically dropped me off. I had bought a book called How to Survive Federal Prison Camp. Okay. Thought, okay, well, hey. It said, don't take anything from it. The book was actually pretty good and accurate to a point where it said, don't take anything from anybody because they will expect you to give them something in return. It didn't say what that was, but I did not want to find out what it was. Okay, so, I get in there to the dorm. They drop me off. It's count time, 4 o'clock count time. After the count, this guy Calloway, long, scraggly hair, had a lazy eye, one eye looking that way, starts making my bed. I'm like, no, don't do that. And this guy, Frank, comes up to me, hey, do you want to borrow these tennis shoes so you don't have to wear those boots? I'm like, no. I mean, I'm like literally freaking out at this point. But the book was wrong on that, okay? Maybe at the higher levels of security, that's the case, but at the camp, no, the good Christian guys just trying to help people out and real, I mean, the majority of the guys I met were nice people. I mean, this is just a little grouping. They look kind of tough, but these are the cupcakes of the federal prison system, by the way. This guy right here, he's a chiropractor, and for some mackerel packets from the commissary, he'd crack your back for you and give you a massage. This guy's a Navy SEAL right here who had some C4 in his garage, and his girlfriend ratted him out. He had a real tough time. They sent him to a high security place at first because of his special skills he had. But the majority of them were drug dealers. Okay, 90% drug dealers. Most of them guys that made mistakes when they were kids, just about, it's funny because one of the last guys, the guy in the middle, the guy that looks, like he's flexing, well, they all look like they're flexing, but he just got out to a halfway house the other day, so pretty much everybody that I really remember has finally gotten out of there. But I'm not 45428 Virginia State Bar. I'm 755-16083. It's funny, I have to look for my bar number, but I remember my inmate number now. Prison's a pretty sad place. There's a lot of broken families. I'm very fortunate. Rachel came visit me every other weekend. And we, everything. We never wavered as far as, our relationship or anything like that. I spent time teaching classes to inmates. They actually let me teach creative real estate investment to inmates, which I thought was hilarious. I'm like, are you kidding me? You're okay? Yeah. With an ethical perspective, of course, but. I participated in sports league, tried to be a mentor to some of the younger guys, that sort of thing. I was the Kool-Aid maker. That was my job. I made 6 cents a month doing it in the cafeteria. After 16 months, I was released to a halfway house. That's just when I got out to that. A little lesson for attorneys and paralegals. It doesn't matter, how serious your involvement is. It's a very minimal thing, a decision. It didn't require profit or anything like that. I think it could have been taken care of personally with the bar and with a civil suit on my end, but hey, it was technically a crime, and you know what? Hey, my number came up, I was wrong. I let them take my license from me, okay? Not saying I tendered it, I'm saying my mistakes is why I don't have a license anymore. And let me tell you this, lawyers, okay? Being a lawyer and not being a lawyer anymore, for the lack of a better word, sucks, okay? People will ask you questions and you're like, well, I can't answer that. I'm not an attorney anymore. Telling people that still look at you like you're an attorney. It's really just it's not a pleasant thing. It only takes once. Doesn't matter that I took remedial measures and fired the client and educated the staff. It doesn't matter. It only took the one time. You can't walk the line on any kind of a deal. 92% conviction rate. Hey, you know what? It's really not that hard for them to pull you across the line. If you stay out of gray areas. I used to have clients tell me, hey, come keep me close to the line, but don't let me cross it. No, you stay as far away from that line as possible, because remember, the United States of America versus Stephen Martin Gunther. If you have a client that tries to convince you or to manipulate you to try and do something wrong, the bottom line is, and it doesn't matter if you're in a great market, a down market, or whatever, whether you need the money or don't need the money, get rid of them, okay? Fire them, get rid of them. Fire your clients, get rid of them if they're doing that. Some pitfalls for attorneys and paralegals, just what I just said right there. Certain clients, especially real estate investors, will try and manipulate you, okay? I'll take my business somewhere else. I'll, whatever. Be careful of being a people pleaser. That's something that I, struggle with, and I think that's a big cause of why I let that transaction happen. I heard what was going on. The people needed the money on the other side, the sellers, blah, 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 and there we go. Now, I don't think being a people pleaser is a bad thing, but as a professional, okay, you have to be very careful of that, letting that slip in. Obviously, greed. I was probably more concerned about my volume than paying attention to what was going on inside my own office. Ignorance, making those loans. Not properly supervising my staff. Clearly, if a closing happened in my office and I didn't know about it, then that problem is mine. It's my fault. And watch out for investors trying to be too creative. Ignorance of the law obviously is no excuse. Poor staff management. I just said that. Should have been aware of what was going on in my office. Right here is just to summarize this for you. You as lawyers are responsible for your lawyer assistants, paralegals, etc. You can read the rule yourself, but basically up to the same accountability that you're held under the rules of professional conduct. And that bad decision, at a critical moment, we all have these moments in our careers, and we got to be very careful and make sure you don't decide too quickly. 2 slides left. Facing adversity. I feel like I really stepped up and did the right thing. I came out of it much better. Most people don't go through what I ended up having to deal with and come out and be, in relatively good shape. I was fortunate that I have my sugar mama over there that is an attorney that was able to pretty much start her own practice. Most of our clients stayed with us, you'll have bad situations, bad days. Tomorrow's always another day. And really, I think that, as far as our limitations, when, my limitations coming out and having this elephant on my back, I think the only person that can really define my limitations is myself. And if I look at it as a hurdle, then it's going to be a hurdle. But I think that that's something that's important. And I really think that I've taken the situation and made it an opportunity to, to do what I can. I've never been paid to speak. I've done 43 events around the country now, done several for Fidelity, Chicago, different title companies, lawyers. I spoke at a high school, the Wisconsin bar, law students. I mean, you name it, I've pretty much spoken to them, business groups, that sort of thing. Obviously, life goes on, things get better, and I do still surf. That's yesterday, by the way, right outside the hotel here. I was very fortunate to actually get some good waves yesterday. So that's about it. If anybody has any questions, I'll be around. Yes?
Can you ever practice again?
It's possible. It's probably a very slim chance. I can apply for my license after 5 years, and it has been 5 years, but I am still on federal probation, actually. I got 5 years of probation, which ends in December. My case got transferred because I live in North Carolina, but my case was in Virginia, so they transferred my case to North Carolina. And in North Carolina, they're a little funnier about terminating probation early, but you can get it done. The problem is that the U.S. attorney is a different U.S. attorney, and it's a different judge, and they don't know anything about me, anything about my case, and the U.S. attorney he objected. And I said, if anybody objects, I'll withdraw. He objected. I stayed true to my word and just withdrew my thing. But
Troy's still in prison?
oh yeah, 70. He's only 3-4 years older than me. So how old's Troy? He's probably, I guess I could do the math. That would make him 50. Huh, how old am I? But I can apply after 5 years. Maybe there's a chance of it. We'll see. I'm going to wait till after all this stuff's finally over with, and then I'll consider giving it a try. So, anything else? Okay. Well, thank you very much. Enjoyed it.